Dun, 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 dun. Dun, 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 dun. Insert theme music here. Insert theme music here. All right. Good evening, world, and welcome to Merriwether's World, where I, Dr. Mark Merriwether Vorderbruggen, Ph.D. chemist and doer of many other things, explains the world to you, at least his view of it. You can't tell right now, but I am drenched in sweat and a little riled. It's been an interesting afternoon here at the Weather Hold. So I did a podcast this afternoon talking to I Know You podcast. Very cool. It'll be ready in 3 weeks. But then afterwards I went out in my backyard because I could hear some dogs barking at each other. So our neighbor has a very nice German Shepherd. You probably heard him in the morning show. But there was a dog on the other side of the fence behind that was very upset. And suddenly I hear the smashing sound of wood and a very vicious dog fight. Not good at all. And then through the fence between me and them comes a pit bull. It bursts through the fence into our yard, being chased by the German Shepherd. And so they're going at it in our yard. I don't recognize the pit bull. The German Shepherd actually basically somehow, the pit bull looked pretty ragged. It had some ribs showing and stuff like that. It looks like it was a dumped fighting dog. But the pit bull kind of retreated. Mira went back to her yard thinking, I am victorious. I have driven the dog out of my yard. And now the pit bull is staring at me. I don't like being stared at by pit bulls, and especially hungry, snarly, kind of bloody pit bulls. And luckily there was a shovel next to me. And so I picked up the shovel and started yelling at the dog. And so it turned and ran, busting through the fence. So not back into the neighbor, back to the German Shepherd, but through the fence, out of the yard, out of the back, and there's an easement behind us. And okay, that's good. And then I'm thinking, all right, oh crap, I got to fix the fence and all this stuff. And within 3 minutes, the dog came bursting through another part of the fence into my backyard again. So at this point, I have 3 holes in my fence, shovel in my hands, and a bloody pit bull staring me down. So wave the shovel, yell at the dog. It goes, okay, this guy's big. He's got a shovel. It goes through the third side of my fencing and takes out several fence cedar panels there. It goes through into my neighbor's yard. I hear it go through the fence on the other side of the neighbor's yard too. So long story short, this dog actually destroyed 5 fences. Not 5 fences, more than 5 fences. Because it went through the fences in 5 different yards, and at least, 1 on either side. It finally made it into a neighbor 5 houses down, where they had dogs, and it was getting into a fight with them. So I'd already called animal control. They said, yeah, they'll send someone out tomorrow. Just capture the dog and hold it for them. Seriously? Capture the dog and hold it for them. Okay, I can do that. So, having been an old-time fan of Steve Irwin, I figured out how to quickly make a capture stick and used an old water skiing rope because it was nice and long and heavy duty, and basically made a lasso on a stick. And we managed to, while some of the neighbors were distracting the dog, I was able to sneak up on it, get a rope around it, and lure it back to my yard, where it is currently tied to a tree. And then I held the dog out so the neighbors with dogs could bring food and water for the dog. And so now it's in the back, tied to a tree with a water ski rope, eating dog food, and it also chewed up a deer skull I had in the backyard. So I didn't get to the
the pig skull, thankfully. But anyway, sometime tomorrow, Harris County Animal Control will come by and get the dog. So, yep. Luckily, spending a lot of time on a dairy farm and watching TV and things like that, we were able to wrangle the dog. But this was not a neighborhood dog. This is a dump dog. We live in an unincorporated area, and we get a lot of dunked animals because it's real easy to get to our neighborhood and then get out of our neighborhood really fast. So this happens on almost a monthly basis somewhere in our neighborhood. Some dogs, and in particular pit bulls, get dropped out. Apparently, there's still a lot of dog fighting in Houston. So yeah, the loser dogs, they get dumped, and quite often in our neighborhood. So anyway, yay. So after the show, I got to go and check out on the dog and make sure it hasn't like strangled itself or anything like that. But yeah, I'm looking at the fences, and okay, granted, I needed a fence, but I didn't have the $1,400 to replace the fence right now. But now it's like we're all looking at our fences and going, well, we could just turn it into one big communal backyard, or fix our fences. Oh well. Yeah, Mike, I don't think the ski rope will last until daylight. We'll find out. No, this isn't a saving grace. This just makes it all that much terrible. Is the dog actually seemed fairly weak? I mean, it truly, you can see his ribs. And it is all scarred up. This thing has been through battles, and then now it's in my backyard. So anyway, that's what I got going for me. So yeah, I finished that up just like 20 minutes before the show started. So I slammed some, supper. Okay, I know we're going to talk about power, but it's been an interesting day. So the only night I don't cook is Wednesday night. So Thursday night is a cook night. So I got to cook food and get it done before the show. And I was thinking some green bean casserole with venison sausage chopped up into it. That sounds good. That sounds yummy. I know the family likes green bean casserole. So all day long, I'm thinking green bean casserole with venison sausage. I don't know. Do you actually care? What the hell? I already got you on the hook. So I went to the pantry to get the other ingredients for green bean casserole. So cream of mushroom soup. No cream of mushroom soup. Green beans. No green beans. This is becoming more complicated. There was a can of clam chowder, but I was thinking, no, not clam chowder. Clam chowder doesn't make a good substitute for green bean casseroles. So what I did find a can of cream of chicken soup. So, okay, we got the cream soup covered. We were out of milk, so sour cream. That's close enough. Mixed in sour cream with the cream of mushroom soup. Sauteed the venison sausage. Mix that in there. Put in a dash of Worcestershire sauce. And then I'm going, okay, I don't have green beans, but I do have cactus pad. So let me tell you, cactus pad, venison, cream of chicken with sour cream casserole with French fried onions on top. Delicious. The family loved it. So, yeah, well, the two of us that were home now, and I assume Mrs. Weather and younger Weather will like it too. Okay, enough about me. How many people did I lose? Not many. All right, so tonight we are going to talk more power. More power. Because last week, if you were here or seen it in replays, talked about solar panels, setting up an emergency solar panel system, and it took a while. And I talked about, what you need to do, how you need to do it. But we didn't get into then, okay, once you got it, what do you do with it? Or more importantly, how do you know how much solar panelness do you need? And so today we are going to talk about the power and what you can do with it and things like that. So to do that, I need to stop sharing that. And then I need to go to share screen, application window, PowerPoint slide. All right, so here we go, jumping into it. So like I said, last week we talked about solar panel systems. We talked about the solar panels and how to calculate their power output and other, what makes them work really well, what interferes with them working, and that sort of stuff. So kind of a solar panel 101. We talked about the battery and the different types of batteries available, and again, how to calculate the power contained in the battery and how long it will take to recharge from a particular solar panel of a given wattage. So figuring out, how much power is in a battery. And then, then we talked about the charge controller. The charge controller is put in between the solar panel and the battery to keep the battery from overcharging and do other useful magical electronic stuff. So the charge controller is basically the lifeguard of the solar panel system, because the solar panels, they can put out a lot of power in full sunlight and properly tilted enough where they can start actually overcharging and damaging the battery. But then at night, when things get dark, if you don't have something in there, the battery will start feeding power back into the solar panel and blow it up. Not good either, especially considering the price of solar panels. So the charge controller basically makes sure the electricity is going where it's supposed to go. Okay, and then the final thing was a power inverter. And what a power inverter does is it converts the DC, direct current energy from the battery, into alternating current, which is what you get from your wall outlets. So the batteries are usually going to be a 12-volt battery, 12-volt DC direct current. That means the electricity just flows in one continuous path, whereas the outlets in your house are 110, 120. They vary some in there, somewhere between 110 and 120. There's some play in there. 110, we'll say 110 volts AC, or alternating current, which means if this is 0, the direction of the electricity goes from negative to positive. So the direction of the flow of electricity keeps fluctuating back and forth. So instead of going in a one path, it's jumping up and down, going positive, negative, positive, negative. And that's just an artifact of the generating the electricity using an actual generator, where you have magnets spinning inside a wire coil. Physics. Look up last week, I talked more about it there. Okay, charge controller. Okay, and I just want to revamp the solar panel calculations again, so we're all on the same page. We remember the terms and the basic calculations. So when you buy a solar panel, on the description, it will say it is a certain number of watts. So my square one here, this is a 30-watt panel that puts out electricity generally at 12 volts. It can put out up to 21 volts if everything is working perfectly, it's perfectly aligned and all that. But for the general calculations, they say it is a 12-volt DC solar panel. Okay, so what does this mean? Let me tell you what it means. It means if you have this panel in sunlight for X number of hours, or a certain number of hours, so in the example here, we say 6 hours. Whoops, erg. So if we have the panel in the sunlight for 6 hours, it's a 30-watt panel. So 30 watts times 6 hours gives 180 watt hours. So you will produce a maximum of approximately 180 watts during that time, but they call it watt hour. And the term watt hour comes into play later on. So just keep it in the back of your head there. Okay, amps. Amps is kind of a measurement of how much electricity is flowing down the wire. So if you think volts, well, let's think of a wire as a hose with water in it, with water being the electrons that are the electricity. So volts is a measurement of, in our analogy, water pressure. So like the house water pressure, it's like 40 psi maybe. So when you turn on your tap in your house, the water comes blasting out at 40 pounds per square inch. But it depends on how big, well, that's doing that. That's the pressure. Now, amps is a measure of how much volume of water is coming out, or in this case, how much volume of electricity is actually being moved. And it boils down to moles and chemistry and physics and stuff again. But the basic calculation to know how much electricity is passing through a particular wire, you multiply the watts. So it's a 30-watt panel. It's pumping out 30 watts of electricity at 12 volts. So you actually divide watts by volts. Scientists figured this out experimentally. But watts divided by volts gives amps. And there's a, I have one of these magic Apple mouses, which is hypersensitive, and it drives me nuts. Okay, so amps. And amps, like I said, it's a measure of how much electricity is passing through the system. Also, a lot of electronic devices will label their power requirements in amps to tell you how much electricity you need to pump into them to make them work. And again, that will come into play when we talk about powering things. Okay, the final thing then is amp hours. How many amps do you get per hour? So going back to the 6 hours of sunlight, it simply multiply the amps that you got by dividing watts by volts. So you got that 2.5 amps from this solar panel over 6 hours. So you get about 15 amp hours. And like I said, I go into a lot greater detail on this in the previous episode. So if you like math, jump back to the previous one. If you don't like math, find a different hobby. It's not hard. It's just, if you follow these terms and the rest of the show, really, you will get an idea of how you use these measurements. So right now, keep in mind here, over a 6-hour period, which is usually, depending on the time of year and so forth, kind of when you get the maximum output from a solar panel. Like in, later in the summer when there's 14 hours of daylight, yeah, you'll get more than 6. But when the sun is overhead at the optimal angle and everything, let's say 6 hours is like when the solar panel will be pumping out at full strength. Okay, so again, keep this in mind, 15 amp hours, 15 amp hours, 15 amp hours. Okay, let's look at a battery. When you buy a battery, in this case, it is what's called a deep cycle deep cycle lead acid battery, which is a fairly inexpensive type of battery, but it has some limitations. Watch last week's show. But it will be sold with the measurements telling the voltage it puts out and its amp hours. So the amount of energy stored in is, and it's kind of hard to see, but right here on the label, it says 35 amp hours. So if this were a bucket of water, it would have 35 amp hours of water stored in it that you can use to do whatever you want. So with the calculations here, watt hour is equal to amp hours times volts. So what this means is if you multiply 12 by 35, so 35 amp hours times 12 volts means you have a maximum wattage of 240 watt hours. I know it's getting confusing. You might have to go over this a few times, but let me try and give you an example. So remember back when we had incandescent light bulbs and you had a 100-watt light bulb. A 100-watt light bulb attached to this battery, if you divide 420 watts by 100 watts, you get 4.2 hours. So a 100-watt light bulb could run for 4.2 hours off this battery, going based on 100-watt requirement of the light bulb and the battery having 420 watt hours of power stored into it. Okay, so keep that in mind. That's, watts and amps are different ways of describing not exactly the same thing, but close enough for this 101 level type stuff. Okay. One other thing, I mentioned that this is in the picture here, this is a deep cycle lead acid battery. That type of battery, you can only discharge it about halfway. If you discharge it below 50%, you actually physically damage the battery and it won't hold power as well after that. So what this means is you can only use half the electricity in this battery. So where that 100-watt light bulb, we were just saying it could go 4.2 hours, actually it can only go about 2.1 hours. If you go longer than that, you will drain the battery, or you will physically damage the battery. With lithium ion batteries, which cost 3 times as much, you can drop those down 80%. And so in that case, the 4.2 hours of light from the 100-watt light bulb attached to the 420-watt-hour battery. I guess I could have done the math, but I'm not going to. We can do the math, but if you basically multiply 4.2 by 0.8, and that will tell you how long you can run off a lithium battery. Okay, so what all this means is when you are trying to figure out how much power you need, don't ask what your solar panel can run. Ask what your battery can run, because you're going to use the solar panel to keep the battery charged up. Why? Well, for one thing, when it gets dark, your solar panel won't be running, be able to produce power. So you need something to run, whatever you're running, it's going to be the battery. So the purpose of the solar panel is to charge up the battery/batteries, plural, because in the end, depending on what you're trying to power, you may end up needing quite a few batteries. So the question is then, what can you power with your battery? All right, give me a drink of water here for a second. So what can we run? All right, before we talk about that, we've got to know, are we going to run straight from the battery as DC direct voltage, or are we going to attach one of these power inverters, which takes the energy from the battery, the 12-volt DC, and through the magic of physics, converts it into 110-volt alternating current? If you can run it straight from the battery, that's best, because running it from an inverter, that magic physics that allows you to go to step it up from 12 volts DC to 110 volts AC, that requires electricity. It's getting electricity from the battery, but that also means it's going to drain the battery that much more quickly because the inverter itself needs power. So about 40% reduction in power if you're between 30 and 40 power loss from the inverter. Okay. So what can we run? Come on, Mark, tell us. We want to know. What can you run? Well, for one thing, you can pretty much run anything that uses what we call in science a wall wart. So anything, like your computer, it has this transformer. Wow, I get too much stuff tangled up here. So where one end is plugged into the wall, and then the other end is plugged to some electronic device. In here, in this transformer, is a thing that converts the electricity from the 110-volt DC 110-volt AC into whatever voltage and current and stuff needed DC of your particular electronic device. So these are not one size fits all. That's why every electronic device seems to have a different wall wart with it to match the specific needs of, let's say, your computer. So like I said, it converts the 110 voltage AC from the wall. Sorry, that was the pit. Can you hear that? That's the pit bull. It's not happy. Okay, so the wall wart, it converts the 110 voltage AC from the wall into the DC voltage It is designed to run or supply a specific voltage at a specific amperage or amps. So if you look closely on these wall warts, and really actually any sort of electronic device, anything that plugs in should have what's called the UL listed label. And what that gives is it gives the voltage the device runs on, the the amperage, and this one actually gives the wattage. And remember, we mentioned watts is volts times amps, so 12 volts times 2 amps gives 24 watts. Handy, they do all the math for you already. So it's saying the input from the wall socket, it can be 100 to 240 volts. I said there's some play in your wall voltage. Usually in America, it's going to be 110 volt to 120 volt. When you get over into Europe, they usually go to 240 volts. And then at the 50 or 60 megahertz cycle, blah, 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 blah. You don't need to know that so much. What you need to know is the output. And so the little plug at the end, it is delivering, in this device, it is sending out 12 volts at 2 amps of power. And then down here is another very, very important little symbol. So it looks like the kind of an alien crop circle thing. What this is this is describing how the polarity of this plug is. So if you were to look into the plug, you see there's a metal outer surface, a plastic sheath, and then the other end of the wire is inside. So what this is saying, this is the plug, the center thing here. So it's saying the outer side of the plug is the negative power, and then the wire inside the plug is the positive. So this is important. So like you can get these wall adapters that have a whole bunch of different plugs. So like let's say you forget your wall wart somewhere, you need to replace it. You go on Amazon, you look up a wall wart with the specific voltage and amps, and then you figure out which one of these plugs you need that matches your computer. And usually they'll come, like the replacement wall warts come with these voltage adapters, which means you can actually use them to run a lot of different electronic devices, because one of the nice things is most of the time it will be 12 volts. The output will be 12 volts. Occasionally you will see 14. We'll talk about 14 in a special case later on in the presentation, but it'll be 12 volts. The question is the amperage. And if you start pumping too much amps into your device, you'll burn it up. If you don't put enough amperage into your device, you won't have enough power, enough electricity going in there to run it properly. So you need to know on your computer, and like I said, this is a notebook computer power wart. Don't tell my wife I took it from her. But, it has that information there. Oh, focus. This is basically the same thing here as that. So from all your devices that have a wall wart, you can look on here and see, okay, it runs 12 volts DC and 2 amps. If you remember back on that battery, we got 35 amps to work with. So, that's we can run these things for quite a while. 24 watts, and the battery will put out, well, we would say 420 watt hours, but to drop it only, you want to stop it at 0.5% or halfway. So you would go 210 watts for an hour, or 24 watts for would be like 5 hours, 4 hours, somewhere in that area. You could run your computer off that battery for 4 or 5 hours. That's the whole way the uninterruptible power supplies work, is they have a smaller battery in them that can run the computer until you have time to shut it down if the power goes out in the house or the office. Okay. So, but you need to match, you need to figure out what the wall wart, the voltage, the amps, the watts it's putting out. Like I said, sometimes they'll just give the volts and the watts. I forget, what's this one? Yeah. Okay. So like here on this kitchen kettle, oops, backwards. Can you see it? It's 110 volts and then 900 to 1100 watts. So then from that, we'd have to calculate amps by dividing watts by volts. And that would tell us, how many amps you need, which would then tell us, could the battery run it or not? And at 1,000 watts, not going to happen with this battery. Okay. Like I said, I know this is confusing. You may have to, watch it a few times or something like that, but you'll get it. Once you start thinking about it and looking at your stuff, it will make more sense. Now, if you look at some of your adapters, you might suddenly notice, hey, wait a minute, like this one, it says its DC output is 10 volts rather than 12. So this is a charger for one of my small handheld ham radios. If I were pumping 12 volts into that device, it would blow up the battery on it. So this adapter has only puts out 10 volts. So you need to either get a wall transformer, or a DC adapter that you can set the voltage on, or if you're handy, you can use what's called a buck converter. And what a buck converter is, it's a DC to DC voltage changer or a converter. And like I said, this is, I won't say this is upper level electronics. This is still basic electronics. Kat is there saying she likes circuits and such in physics. You could do this no problem. So you would just have to, between the battery and the plug going into the computer, you would have to wire in the buck converter and with the little knobs adjust it till it's putting out the 10 volts. So, I mean, this isn't exactly do-it-yourself for someone who doesn't know anything about anything, but for people who do know a little bit or realize, hey, this doesn't say 12 volts and my battery is 12 volts, what do? You need a buck converter. So pursue that line on your own, or you can, email me and have me walk you through that more. Okay. So Mark, you've done all this math and you've shown all these numbers, but we still don't know what's going on. What can we run? Okay. So go to a truck stop, like a real truck stop, not Buc-ee's. Well, Buc-ee's has some stuff, but I mean, I love Buc-ee's, nothing against Buc-ee's, but like a Love's or a Flying J, the sort of place where they have showers that the truckers can use. And in the back, in the trucker area, you will find shelves filled with all sorts of appliances and even TVs that are designed, TVs and DVD players and all these things that are designed to run off a 12-volt electrical system of a vehicle. So it's kind of hard to see in this picture, but I mean, there's crock pots, there's coffee makers, there's water boilers, there's a toaster, there's fans. There's like, gravity. In my vehicle when I'm camping, I have the fan that I plug into my cigarette lighter and use that to keep me cool when I am like camping in my vehicle at night at a truck stop or a rest stop area, things like that. In the morning, depending if I have enough power left, I could even go as far as to make some coffee. I will say though, most of these things, especially with heaters, are designed to be used while the vehicle is running. The reason being is when the vehicle is running, it is continuously putting out power, as opposed to just trying to take the power from the battery. The battery will run out of power. As long as the engine is running, you will keep giving the power these different devices need. So yeah, this is a good place to look at what's available, but keep in mind that especially things with heaters and coffee makers, they will drain a battery really fast. You may get one pot of coffee off your 35 amp hour battery. maybe 2. You might get like 1 pot of coffee and be able to warm up one. But that's what you're going to get. Okay, yes, Jonathan, you jumped ahead there because you're a smart dude. Whoops, did it show? There we go. Yes. So the other place to look for DC appliances, things that are designed to run on 12 volts, are RV shops. So like Camping World and different places where they sell the RVs and pop-up campers and things like that, because a lot of the appliances in those are designed to run on 12 volt. And this includes air conditioners and margarita machines. Yeah. So, yeah. Truck stop. Most people have a truck stop around them that they can hit and just look at what's available. But like Jonathan was saying, the best places are the RV dealerships. They have all sorts of amazing DC appliances. Okay, so like I said, so check out a truck stop for an idea. Remember, these are designed for running vehicles. You can run them for a short while off your battery, but more likely they're designed for a full motor running. And anytime you require heat, it's really going to drain the power quickly. Oops. Okay, so all right, Mark, that helps some, but what can we run a long time? So if we have a single battery, and this is a little fancy battery because it does have a built-in inverter to it, but if we have a battery running off direct voltage, it's kind of hard to see here, but this is your regular cigarette lighter. I mean, this is this fan with this plug on it. What can we do with that? You can run this a damn long time. So the voltage on this, it's 12 volts and 0.8 amps. So to cut to the chase, I've used the 35 amp battery. I'm not going to lift it because it's really heavy. The one in the picture is a 25 amp. The 25 amp has run the fan for 2 days straight. So you can get a lot of fan from it. Now with the LED lights, you can get, all night long, usually even like 2 nights worth of light from a small battery. Use it to recharge electronics. Now, when you're doing that, you want to make sure you're using like the car charger that plugs into a 12 volt car source, because that, we'll just say it does some magic to help better match the electricity coming out of the battery or the 12 volt power system to your electronic device and keeps it from damaging the electronic device. So get a high quality little 12 volt adapter that you can then plug the USB cable in and charge up your phone or your iPad. Okay, the other thing you can usually do is run the modem and router. So during the power outage, I was running our Wi-Fi and our fiber optic modem off the battery, keeping it charged. So that was handy. We could have Wi-Fi. I mean, I had the generator, but I didn't want to run the generator all the time. And there was time when I was sending the power over to the neighbor. So during those times when the neighbor was getting the power, I was running our stuff off the battery. So yeah, comfort items. Fans to cool you, lights so you can see at dark, and then your smartphone and your modem and your Wi-Fi router so that you can stay attached to civilization. Okay, so like Jonathan mentioned, RV dealerships, they sell special refrigerators that are designed to be worked or run off a 12 volt DC system. You can also find these, they're very popular with what are called overlanders. These are, like van life people, the people who live in their vehicle and go exploring the world because they have a big van or, a 4Runner or something like that. So they make these really super efficient freezers that can run on as little as 1 amp. So 1 amp hour, they're basically sipping electricity. They're only slightly more power than this fan. And I mentioned I can run the fan for 2 days. So a little battery, if you're willing to spend the $1,400 for this freezer, you can keep things frozen in it. If you have medications or something that need to be refrigerated, this is something you might consider, because you can actually run it off your solar charger. For basically for $200, you can have a complete solar system that will keep this freezer working indefinitely for as long as the sun, as long as the sun shows up like every day and a half, 2 days, you'll be able to keep this freezer running. Okay, I mentioned they make the TV DVD players, and we're talking 24 inches type things. So you can get they will require 2.5 amps. The TV DVD player actually requires more amperage than the freezer. That's kind of astounding. But there you go. You got your TV, you got your DVD, you got your kids sedated when the power is out because you're a hero, because you got the solar power panel system. Okay. Oops. Just a minute. So Timmy mouse. Okay. So Timmy Burris, I know him. He does a lot of solar type stuff. He has a trailer. He's saying that his Dominic CFX 28 refrigerator uses 175 watt hours for 24 hours. So that's a little higher one. The Arb, I was amazed at how efficient. How many quarts space, Timmy, does that one hold? The ARB one, it's a 65 quart. Like I said, it's also $1,400. I was looking at the Dome Tech ones, and they're a little cheaper, but still pretty good. Okay, Mike, yeah, on your homestead, you have a 12-volt TV DVD player too. Cool. In your camper. Okay. An RV air conditioner. So, recreational vehicle air conditioner. Now we're getting up about 30 amps or 30 amp hours. So that's taken some power. And that can be a little tricky to power off the battery. You're not going to get much of that. That's why a fan blowing air is usually a better choice than trying to run an AC off the battery. Now, I know Nick over at Wazoo Survival, with their camper trailer, they have a big solar panel system on the top and a bunch of batteries hidden in the trailer. And he actually can run a small window air conditioner to cool the trailer off. This is important because they have the search and rescue dogs. So it's possible, but not off one battery. Usually you have to start, adding more batteries to the system. All right. Okay, so what can you run for just a short amount of time? So we already talked, a lot of things that have heating elements. So you can buy these electric pots for heating up water, even bringing water to a boil. This particular one, just a random one I found on Amazon, it requires 120 watts. It's a lot of watts. And it takes about 30 minutes to boil 1 liter of water. But during the power outage and the water outage, and they were telling people to boil your water, you would have been able to at least boil 1 liter of water. You probably, depending on how low you're going to do your batteries and how much sun is out there, because you can charge the battery and use the battery at the same time. It's not the best way of doing it, but it's better than nothing. But you can kind of have the sun feeding the power into the batteries, and you have your water boiler attached to the battery, boiling water. And so you could, overall, if you weren't able to recharge the battery, you could just about boil 2 liters of water. And, it's better than nothing. If the only water you have is snow you melted, and then you got to boil it, yeah, you might look into these. They're $30. If I was smart, I would have had a link to put up there that would earn me money, but I was dealing with a dog. Okay, other things like a slow cooker. If you go on Amazon and look up 12-volt DC slow cooker, there's a bunch of options there. And again, those are 40 watts to 300 watts. So you're going to have a hard time running them off a battery. But if you have multiple batteries hooked up, then you can do it. But then that also requires multiple solar panels usually to charge the multiple batteries. So you end up in money. And after a while, it's almost cheaper to get a generator. But at least a 1 liter water boiler, that might be something, spend the $30, put it in your emergency supplies for, even after a hurricane, we have to boil water. And usually after a hurricane, there is a lot of sunlight. So, you got that going for you. Okay. So my brother uses a Cpap machine. And he travels a lot. So he has to travel all over the place with this. And so I asked him to send me a picture of this UL. Where is it? Yeah. So of the UL tag on it, where it gives, okay, this thing runs at 12 volts, and 6.67 amps. That's a lot of power draw. Like I said, this fan is 0.8 amps to have it spinning at high speed and making me nice and cool. The Cpap machine, it's at 6.67 amps. So if we multiply the 12 volts by 6.67 amps, that's 80.04 watts of power. So going back to the battery, and if you had the right adapter for it with the right plug, you could run straight from the battery to the Cpap machine. If you were willing to sacrifice the battery, the lead acid battery, and drain it 100%, you would still only get 5.25 hours of runtime from your Cpap machine. But if you treated your battery properly, if you only had one battery and only took it down 50%, you would get 2.6 hours out of your Cpap machine. So that means, if you're just having some random Cpap machine and want to get batteries to charge it in a situation like this, you would have to buy the adapter. You would have to buy multiple 35 amp hour batteries. Now they make batteries. They make 100 amp hour batteries. They're big. They're heavy. They're like 60 pounds. So, something to keep in mind there. If you're trying to run stuff, you're going to need batteries. You're going to need the solar panels to charge things. So part of the purpose of this is to show that you can't just slap a power panel on your roof, a 30-watt power panel, and run your entire house. Okay, here's another good thing from Timmy here. Let me get my mouse. So your basic coffee pot, simple coffee pot, 632 watts, but only 6 watt hours for a 4-cup pot. Okay, so 300-watt rice cooker comes up for about 130 watt hours for a meal. Well, reasonable. Especially if you got the ones designed straight for DC from the truck shop or the RV store, you would have a better chance of running things off the battery. Ooh, yeah, okay. So with the lithium iron phosphate battery, which is a lot lighter than the lead acid, lithium is a lot lighter than lead. So that 100 amp hour lithium phosphate battery weighs 26 pounds. So that's still kind of hefty there. Yeah, and Mike hits it right on the nose. If you are trying to heat something, you are much better off with a propane heater or a propane gas stove, a camp stove, something like that. So if you're trying to boil water or make rice or make coffee, you're better off with a $50 camp stove and a $4 bottle of propane for it, and use that to boil your water. Don't try and use the solar power. Cool. I appreciate your guys' helping me out here. Okay, I'm back to this. I threw the Cpap in there because talking to people, there's a lot of people who use the Cpap machine, And in an emergency situation, grid down situation, you still want to be able to breathe. So I thought I'd throw it in there to help them kind of open their eyes as to what sort of batteries and how much battery they would need really to run their Cpap machine. Okay, let me drink a little bit of water here. Oh, wow. And I just realized I completely forgot to mention my sponsors. So let me just throw that out here. So remember, the Wazoo Survival, they have a coupon code. Or sorry, no, they don't have a coupon code, but they are the ones that pay for the StreamYard account. So check them out. They have all sorts of get you back home gear. We have Arborists. So if you have, in another month, you will know if your trees are dead. And if you have some trees that need to be taken down, I highly recommend Arborists. They are based in Kingwood, Texas, but they travel all over the Gulf Coast region, into Louisiana and pretty much all over Texas to come and help you. Definitely good people you can trust. Of course, Uncommon Bees for your sugar fix, your honey, your apiary wares. Are they here tonight? I hope they're here tonight because Uncommon Bees, they run a lot of their stuff off solar power too. So he has lots of solar panels, lots of batteries. And don't forget, if you use the coupon code Forking Weeds, you get 25% discount between when the show starts and 9:30 p.m. on Thursdays. Otherwise, it gives you a 10% discount. Okay, for my favorite backpacking packs and gear, Campcraft Outdoors, use the Take 10 coupon there for 10% off all they have. Check them out. They have great stuff. It's not the namby-pamby plasticky stuff. This is canvas and brass and leather and wool. And when you are off the trail, stuff that is damn near, definitely briar proof and damn near bomb proof. This would work. Okay, there we go. Herbs. The Plant Shop Herbs by tribe member Ricardo Shilly Shally. I think he was here tonight. Anyway, use the Forking Weeds coupon there for 15% off during the show until midnight on Thursdays. And the cool thing about Ricardo as an herbalist is if you don't know what you need, you have symptoms. You can talk to him. He'll do a Zoom call with you, basically do a question and answer about all sorts of things. And based on the results then of that, he will develop an herbal regimen for you. Okay, and last but not least, the Fear and Dread Shop in Vidor, Texas for all your survival needs. Definitely check them out. Use the coupon code TRIBE for 7% off there. Okay, thanks. I just needed to throw those out there because, I make promises to these people. I got to keep those promises. Okay, so going back to math and the calculations. So to figure out how much battery you need, which will then tell you how much solar panel you need, you got to figure out, okay, what all do I actually want to run? And most importantly, what all do I want to run at the same time? And then this leads to the question is, okay, how much energy do those things? What's the watts? What's the amps? What's the voltage? Once you know that, then you can calculate how big of a battery you need. So let's do an example. In this case, running this fan and the MacBook I use for the donut shop in the morning. So if I want to, in the summer, it's hot out, I want to run the MacBook and a fan while I'm doing the donut shop. Can I do that? Okay, so looking at the fan and on it, I don't know if you can see it there, but it says 12 volts DC at 0.8 amps. And Timmy, I'm counting on you to keep me out of trouble with these calculations because I whipped this together between, dealing with a pit bull. But okay, so the fan, it's 12 volts DC at 0.8 amps. The MacBook, if we look at it, it is 14 volts DC at 3.1 amps. So the total, if we add the amps, the 0.8 amps and 3.1 amps, add those together. Let's say we want to go 5 hours. So that's what we're trying to do. Donut Shop doesn't go 5 hours, but let's say I'm spending 5 hours somewhere where I want the fan and the MacBook. So I got to multiply the amps by 5 hours, and that tells me it's going to take about 19.5 amp hours. 19.5 amps, adding the 2 amps together, multiplying by the 5 hours I want to run it, it gives me 19.5 amp hours. Okay. So we got the fan, we got the MacBook to run at 5 hours, 19.5 amp hours. But I'm going to use my lead acid battery, which is a 35 amp hour battery. So it sounds like, yeah, that would be good. That should run it. Well, it'll run it, but I only drop it down to 50%. And so that means I only have about 17.5 amp hours. So 17.5 amp hours is smaller than 19.5 amp hours. So what this means is, yes, I can run the fan and the MacBook together at the same time, but not for 5 hours. It's going to die, or I'm going to have to protect the battery, I'm going to have to turn them off before then. So when it gets down to about 50%. So I can go close. 17.5 is close to 19.5. I can probably go 4 hours. 4 hours, okay, that's good. That's good. We'll go 4 hours. But remember, I also mentioned, this here, the MacBook, it is 14 volts DC rather than 12 volts DC. So that requires a little more power, because the battery is putting it at 12 volts. So what do I do? So that's where you need another adapter. So like I said, the purpose of this tonight's presentation is to kind of show you what you need to make you decide if it's even worth it. But so when I got my MacBook, I also bought a third-party adapter. And so I plug it into the 12-volt power source, magic electronics happens, and out the end comes the 14 volts I need from the power adapter. So there are a lot of aftermarket power adapters, because a lot of notebook computers don't run on 12 volts. They do need 14 volts. So there are a lot of companies that make these adapters that allow you to plug in your car directly into plug in your computer directly into a 12-volt power source. Magic occurs, and your computer gets the proper voltage and current that you need. So again, you would go on Amazon, and I actually have a link here for one. Computer car adapter. So you would put in, why is this not? Oh, there we go. Okay. So if you are trying to run your computer, you would go, say, to Amazon or some other, I guess Newegg no longer exists, do they? But you would say car adapter and the name, model, like the manufacturer and model number of your computer. And it will bring up some sort of adapter that works. So like this actually worked with over 100 different types of computers from different manufacturers, because in the end, a lot of the components all use the same power source. And so the computer manufacturers are using off-the-market components to build their computers. And so there's going to be a limited diversity in the power requirements of these, because they're all using the same internal parts. So it's actually pretty easy to find the magic device you need to run your notebook computer off a 12-volt battery. Now, in doing so, you are going to lose some, the magic requires power. There's no such thing as a free lunch. The magic requires power, so you're going to lose something. So again, that 4 hours we said we were running, now it's going to be even less. Keep that in mind. Okay, wow, this went really fast. Let's say you want to run a big freezer. It's going to take a lot of batteries. You're going to need a high power voltage or high power inverter, because these things can't run off, your I'll just show here. Like our chest freezer. Yay, chest freezer, because the only place we have to put it is in the hallway. Yeah, it would need a whole bunch of batteries and some sort of inverter, because you cannot make a direct current power for this. It would have to be using a power inverter that converts the DC power to AC power. And to run a fridge, I don't know if you can see here, but this is from the calculations, blah, 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 calculations. The operating power, it requires about 575 watts. But you're converting to AC, so you're losing some power. But also, because it uses a compressor needs even higher amounts of energy to get going, to start spinning. Once it's spinning, it's easy to maintain it spinning. But to get it first started spinning, you almost need twice as much power. So, the 575 watts times 1.3, because you're losing 30%, or you need an extra 30% because you're losing something in inverter, times 2, because you need twice as much power at the beginning. You need an inverter that can actually supply almost 1,500 watts. They make them, but your 35 amp hour battery is not going to do it. You're going to need multiple batteries, multiple big batteries. Okay, wow. Where's my mouse? So, a lot of information, as usual. But like I said, again, the main purpose is kind of give you a basic idea of what you need to know to get a system going. You may have to go back and rewatch this. Another thing I will be doing with this video and last week's video, I have the emergency prep section now on the Foraging Texas website, and I'm breaking those videos. I will be breaking those videos into little bite-sized pieces and words and stuff so you can read to help you better understand it, so you don't just have to rewatch the video over and over again. You can go to the specific spots where it's doing the different calculations. Okay, Timmy again. Our AC in our camper is 405 watts. In 9 hours, it uses 1,250 watt hours. We run it off a Renology 1,000 watt inverter. If I remember correctly, the Renology one, actually, that's the one I had in the picture there. Yeah, it can put out continuous 1,000 watts, and it can do a surge of 2,000 watts. So it can get the compressor going, and then, which requires more power, but you don't need that massive amount of power once it's going. You just need a somewhat large amount of power. And so the inverter then can keep going at that smaller amount of power longer, more efficiently. Okay. Drinking from a fire hose. Merriwether's fire hose. There we go. That'll be it. But yeah, episode 97 in the books. Pretty much done here. We're after 9. So 3 more episodes. Next week, I'll be up in Minnesota, and everyone's going, yeah, you'll be able to do Merriwether's World with your dad, your mom. Yay, cool. Probably not going to happen, because actually I'm meeting up with friends up in Minnesota, and they had to meet on Thursday night. So there won't be Merriwether's next week. The following week, I'll be talking about hygiene, kind of washing and grit down, low water sort of situations, because that was another big issue during the winter storm. Episode 99 will be the return of Professor Brandon Laurie. and he is going to walk you through how to make a PVC bow and arrow. So that should be cool. And I needed to have him on one more time before we end. And then there's episode 100, and I'm frantically trying to figure out what I'm going to do for episode 100, and I don't have a clue because it sounds like it should be a special episode, and I don't have anything special planned yet, but I'm trying to figure that out. I have some ideas. We'll see. Okay, everyone. I've been talking straight for over an hour, which, yeah, is kind of normal for me. But yeah, we're going to end now. Like I said, I need to go check out the dog, see what it was howling about, make sure it's okay. As okay as a scary, beat up, bloodthirsty ex-war dog Rottweiler can be. Not Rottweiler, pit bull. Wish me luck. Hopefully I'll have all my fingers tomorrow. Until then, hang out, hug someone, pet someone, touch a tree, and I will see you tomorrow at the donut shop. Until then, ending broadcast.